Here to pull together a very brief introduction. Most of you already know him and know some of those things about him. And there may be a few things here that you don't know. So let me introduce John, who's going to be our keynote speaker. And so let me start here. John Thorn is the official historian of Major League Baseball. Apart from his creation with Pete Palmer of Total Baseball and the Hidden Game of Baseball, he is often visible on TV and the web. He was also a major on-screen presence and chief consultant to Ken Burns' PBS film Baseball. His many baseball books over the years, over the past 4 decades, include Treasures of the Baseball Hall of Fame, The Game for All America, and Our Game, a history of the game, which also supplies the title to his twice weekly blog. That's ourgameblogs.com. In 2011, Simon & Schuster published his major work in our antiquarian field, Baseball in the Garden of Eden, a secret history of the early game. His own research has revealed the earliest direct reference to baseball to date in the United States, in a 1791 town ordinance in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. He was also brought greater relevance of Doc Adams as one of baseball's founding fathers, and Adams' role in baseball's Magna Carta, the 1857 written rules of our national game. For this and much more, he is the recipient of SABR's Chadwick Award for his contributions to baseball research. Perhaps most relevant here is John's being the co-creator of SABR's 19th Century Committee and our committee's first co-chair, along with Mark Rucker, beginning in 1987. His decades of service to SABR, for which he received the Bob Davids Award, service to our national 19th Century Committee, for which he received the Chairman's Award, and his being an invaluable resource to countless baseball researchers, giving generously of his time and knowledge. John has been part of our Fred conference since 2009, its first year, when he was one of our 4 panelists in a discussion led by Fred Ivor-Campbell, and was also that year our very first keynote speaker. Since then, until the last Fred, John has generously served as moderator of our panel discussion at the Fred and has played a role in each of our city-specific 19th century interdisciplinary symposiums, including a 5th symposium on 19th century Brooklyn baseball this November. I hope you will join me in welcoming John Thorn. John, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Peter. I'm going to start with a mild correction. Rucker and I created this research committee in 1982, not 1986.
Oh, that's all right. I'm sorry. I had a typo. Thank you for that correction.
Let me get that out of the way. Otherwise, I want to greet all you wonderful people out there in the dark, and I'm ready for my close-up. And I delivered the keynote speech at the first annual conference of SABR's 19th Century Baseball Research Committee at Cooperstown on April 18th, 2009. I've been invited to return to bookend the conference and, at my age, my career. This shindig, by the way, was not yet known as the Fred because Fred Ivor-Campbell was the one who organized and chaired it. Anyone who knew him wishes he were here with us today. How we got here is the ambiguous title for today's retrospective talk. It could refer to how SABR has grown from a tiny acorn to, if not to a mighty oak, at least a sturdy stripling. But that's a subject I addressed long ago. Suffice it to say that since 2009, we have all grown larger and fatter and older and better than when Mark Rucker and I founded this group almost 40 years ago. How we got here could also refer to this Zoom conference, a sign of progress and regress both. What made this occasion necessary to lean upon Yogi Berra was our egress from normal life in this generation's great epidemic. We can get together all right in pixelated form, but we can't go out for a beer at evening's end. How we got here could also refer to baseball itself, bookended by disease and distress. At one end, COVID, at the other, nearly 200 years ago, cholera. Later labeled correctly as a disease transmitted through foul drinking water, cholera was at that time understood as an airborne miasma, like COVID. Cholera killed one of every 65 New York City residents in 1832 and returned to wreak havoc in 1849. In between, dread hung over the city as the epidemic was widely believed to return cyclically every dozen years or so. Cholera then was every bit as life-altering as COVID-19 is now. When young men in New York began to play baseball, it was part of a hygienically inspired boom in gymnastics, boating, ballroom dance, and baseball. The belief was that exercise would lead not only to muscle development for spindly desk-bound clerks, but also to an enlarged lung capacity that would ward off airborne disease. The breezes of Hoboken were thought especially pure. It may not be too much to say that without the flight from epidemic, there would have been no baseball as a game for grown men and, 20 years after, a paying crowd of spectators. In our sundown perambulations of late, through the outer parts of Brooklyn, we've observed several parties of youngsters playing base, a certain game of ball. Let us go forth a while and get better air in our lungs. Let us leave our close rooms. The game of ball is glorious. Everyone here today recognizes these words as Walt Whitman's, exhumed in Ken Burns's Baseball from an unsigned editorial in the Brooklyn Eagle of July 23, 1846. With these opening words of the 9-evening film on PBS in 1994, baseball history, particularly of that primordial time, became an overnight sensation. And we researchers of even more distant days were just getting started, finding evidence of baseball play in New York in 1823, and Pittsfield in 1791, and Princeton in 1786. We hope to follow Whitman's advice and leave our close rooms soon enough, certainly in time for next year's Fred Conference in Cooperstown. For us, baseball is the balm of life with its familiarity, its regularity, its restorative rhythms. It is perhaps the only thing we have cared about uninterruptedly since childhood. It has masqueraded as the unchanging game, even as we and everything around us seem to be in a headlong rush to what exactly? Death, I suppose. Baseball has been a haven from the drive and push and rush and struggle of the raging, tearing, booming 21st century. And an excursion into the game's past has provided for many of us a safe, calming space. Of course, change is coming to baseball. You'll forgive me, I lost my way here. Of course, change is coming to baseball now. In truth, it had never left. And Whitman's quote turns out to have been plagiarized. And Cartwright has been consigned to the same dustbin of baseball history as Doubleday. Verities once thought eternal turn out to have been a con. Change is the only constant in baseball as in life. And a large part of early baseball's appeal to us is its wayward rise with experimental rules, horrific missteps, and for us, endless mysteries. In the years since the first Fred in 2009, books published by committee members and by the committee as a group, Inventing Baseball was a marvel in 2003. have advanced the state of our knowledge and the depth of our understanding. We have marked the graves of several worthies, and this summer we will provide a headstone for organized baseball's first Hispanic player, Luis Judd Castro. I can hear the chirping about Cuban-born Steve Bayon, but MLB dates its onset in 1876, and Bayon last played league ball in 1874. We have established interdisciplinary symposiums in different cities that have attracted scholars in fields other than baseball to enrich our appreciation for how the game grew to its present state. The next such symposium will be in Brooklyn later this year. I plan on attending and perhaps presenting. Then there are the wonderful Protoball and Retro Sheet sites, each aligned with our activities, though not under the SABR umbrella. We all share our finds and insights on our listserv and on social media, particularly Facebook and Twitter. One day soon, we will create a presence on Instagram via the new iconography project with pictures driving linked captions. And then there's the Preston Orem project, dreamed of for decades and completed recently, and the wonderfully imagined radio broadcast of the game of June 14, 1870, and the scholarly annual Baseball, which began life in 2007 as a semi-annual journal. We've been busy. Individuals deserve credit for each of these cited landmarks in early baseball research, but I will not name them for fear of leaving someone off. I must, however, credit our committee chairman, Peter Mancuso, who oversees all of our work with the aid of Bob Bailey. I've had a hand in much of this, except for the overlooked 19th century baseball legends, in which I vote but otherwise do not pop my head above the trench line. My MLB role militates against open advocacy, though of course, you all know I hold briefs for Doc Adams, Jim Creighton, Al Reach, and Bud Fowler, pioneers all. It does seem to me, though, that the Hall of Fame has enough players from the 19th century. So I am not cheery about the prospects for Harry Stovey, Pete Browning, Tony Mullane, Ross Barnes, or other worthies still overlooked in these annual elections. This is one man's view and no more. I am not against the polling of our experts' sentiments. The big question for me is, what is it about 19th century baseball that makes us love it so? Some of us like the players. The more obscure, the better, so that we may find new info and make them our trophies, like shrunken heads worn around our waists. Some of us gravitate toward the teams, whether dominant like the Cincinnati Red Stockings or forlorn like the Wilmington Quicksteps. Some like the bumptious, ornery magnets. Others are drawn by the invention and novelty of a game still finding its way. Is it merely that everything about any major institution is more interesting when it was an infant? Cars, railroads, movies, rock and roll? We know the old game is not better played than today's or that of the 1950s, but there is room in any evaluation for two entries, the first and the best. The early game is not the best, but it will forever compel interest as the first. Baseball today is wealthy, efficient, respectable. It is played to a higher level of skill than ever before, even if its hold on the nation becomes more tenuous with each strikeout, walk, or home run. Once upon a time, in the very era we celebrate at this conference, the game was rough and tumble with hobos like John McGraw or vagabonds like Rube Waddell standing out as heroes for cigarette-smoking, baseball card-trading boys who would be men. Once upon a time, the game had the melodramatic suspense of a dime novel and the pugnacity of the potboiler stage play. The bad old days when few truly played the game well were wild, raucous fun. Speaking for myself, I grew up with the game as we all did. I was a fan. I loved baseball as it rolled out season by season, long before I noticed and came to love its history. I started out drawn to the dead ball era, largely by Ritter and the Seymours, but by 1980 found the era too crowded with other researchers. I needed the elbow room that early baseball seemed to allow me. Everywhere I looked was something that others might not have noticed, something that I could call mine. Like Cracker Jack, there was a prize in every box I opened. I came to realize that baseball in 1886 was not so different from baseball in 1986. That while there were differences galore, if one were to teleport the fan of one century today, if one were to teleport the fan of one century today to the ballpark of the other, he or she would instantly recognize the game as baseball. It is the quaintness of the old ball game that makes those at the Fred love it, but it is the similarity that has recently proven to be of practical value. Let me expand upon that. As the epidemic raged, baseball, perhaps the least of concerns for citizens defending lives and livelihood, was put on hold. That was true of the game last year and in the 1840s, when it may be said that baseball clubs were born. The enemy then was cholera, and the year was 1849. Doc Adams of the Knickerbocker Baseball Club said of that time, when the game was new and opponents not readily found, our players were not very enthusiastic at first and did not always turn out well on practice days. I frequently went to Hoboken to find only 2 or 3 members present. During the summer months, many of our members were out of town, thus leaving a very short playing season. It turned out that the very short playing season of 2020, like that of 1849, provided food for thought. Probably that was the year Adams came up with his brainstorm to add shortstop to the accustomed playing field of 8 men. Despite preseason cries for a proliferation of asterisks in the record books for all things 2020, MLB presented the totals as it always has, with no symbolic annotations that would send the casual fan to endnotes or an appendix. Truly, every season has its invisible footnotes. Its special circumstances recalled by the learned among us. This past season, except for its length, the first 60-game season since 1878, had peculiarities no more eye-popping in their effects on the record books than 1894 or 1930 or 1968 or 1998. The record of a season is what happened. Explanations may be offered, but they do not alter the fact. Because MLB officially makes no distinction between 19th century and later records, all seasons are, despite their singularities, more alike than different. Acceptance of the 60-game regular season of 2020 may have made it easier in December of last year to comprehend and accept the inclusion of the Negro Leagues of 1920 to 1948 into MLB's historical record, despite myriad circumstances that once had made those seasons seem, to modern eyes, disqualifyingly short. It had long been clear within MLB that the reason for the very existence of separate baseball leagues, racial exclusion, was a grievous mistake. Yet unrecalled had been an additional historic error, the failure in 1969 of the Special Committee on Baseball Records to consider the Negro Leagues for inclusion in the historical record when it had evaluated the credentials of past professional baseball leagues. While admitting the records of 4 other circuits, 3 of them before 1900 and only one of these lasting beyond a single season, the Negro Leagues had come in for not a mention. Why was the Union Association of 1884 termed a major league and the National Association of 1871 through 1875 not? Gosh, I don't know. Though the stated reason for demoting the NA had been due to its erratic schedule and procedures. No reason was offered for the inclusion of the bedraggled Union Association. Maybe someone here today could take that on. To conclude, I'll stick around for questions. The state of early baseball research has advanced remarkably, thanks in large measure to the folks gathered here today. All of you have heard of Doc Adams and Jim Creighton and Bud Fowler. None of you believes that baseball was invented by anyone. None of you believes that baseball's history or its records begins with an imprecisely defined modern era. Red Smith observed, 90 feet between bases is perhaps as close as man has ever come to perfection. He did not know that the distance was created neither by Cartwright nor by God, but by Doc Adams. Smith made no similar claim for 60 feet 6 inches, unchanged since 1893. The rules changes for balls and strikes, the unified strike zone and the foul strike were all important, but not sacrosanct either. The unchanging game must change, and it will find precedent and guidance in our favorite century. Thank you.
John, that was very moving and very, in a way, it's prolific in describing what all future fans and our next generation of 19th century committee members will have all of this to look back on.
Well, there's a lot to look back on, but there's more ahead.
Exactly. How about any comments or questions of John? I don't know how we'll, oh, here we go. I got from Dennis, thanks, John, well stated. Okay. John, what do you think has been, since the first Fred, that first conference in 2009 when Fred was still with us, what do you think has been maybe what has pushed the envelope in a way in terms of research?
I think we have outstanding books by David Block, by Tom Gilbert, by too many others to mention. We have had some good biographies. I believe that the works that focus on making baseball seem older than we had thought and more American than we had thought have been salutary. The idea that today we're looking at 60 feet 6 inches, perhaps being moved back a foot or more, that we are looking at the Negro Leagues records as maybe not so short. Maybe the seasons were understandable. I think understanding old baseball is the way to understanding baseball as it must change in the future. It always has changed. The notion that it is static change on Twitter, you get these morons saying, stop changing the game. It's never changed before. Why do you have to change it now? Well, if you don't understand history, then of course you can't understand the present. And I believe that everyone on this call and everyone who's been a member of the committee has loved the game as it is played today for all its warts and loved the game from its beginning. And when you understand and comprehend the long span, it makes you better equipped to prescribe for the future. And that's what we care about. We care about the game of baseball as an enduring American institution, changing in its relationship to the public, changing in its relationship to other sports, yet uniquely the national pastime.
What I'm getting hit here on the chat button is a shower of comments wanting to, in a way, memorialize your little I won't say your little talk today. This was really uh, in a sense, a very comprehensive statement, and more than a statement, a very heartfelt uh, expression of what you have seen over the years, and in your terms of your own research and the research of others. Is there a way to memorialize this? Is there a way that we need to publish this in a sense?
Oh, I'll put it up at our game. I may put it up on Monday.
I was hoping that.
And I believe we've got it. We're going to have it. We're recording the video, so
Yes.
Jacob may have the ability to offer an entire day's YouTube video or break it out into segments. And
Yes.
the idea that I'm talking to all my friends who are in the dark, I can't see them, is really, really strange. But I guess that's what movie stars do.
I know it's a little eerie, but it is certainly a talk that many people here have even expressed, uh, that needs to be seen and seen more broadly. And so on our game, which can be Googled and reached, John's blog can be reached very simply. We hope that you will do that, and we'll post it and make it much more broadly available to a lot of baseball fans, not only 19th century committee people, but other people as well. Many, many thank yous are coming through here, John. So, I'm trying to keep up with them. John is a mentor to each of us, from Alan.
All of these bouquets are lovely. I can't collect them unless we can memorialize the chat and somebody can send them to me.
Right. Listen, John, I just want to go through one of the best keynotes I have ever heard. I really enjoyed how you compared the two epidemics, which is very true, and how it has affected everyone and everything. Larry McGill, last night we saw a great presentation from Craig Brown on 19th century team photographs, posting some of the interesting gaps are ripe for further research. Where does your mind go as you think about other areas of further research in 19th century baseball? That's a question to you, John.
I would love to know more about the clubs before the Knickerbockers. I would love to know more about the New York Club, which was known also as the Gothams and later as the Washington Baseball Club. It's one continuous club. I treated that as thoroughly as I could in Baseball in the Garden of Eden, yet I have the feeling that it and the Magnolia Club and the Eagle Club, as founded in 1840, and the unnamed club that played at the Retreat on Art Street in 1823 and was formed in 1821. I don't know a blessed thing about these, and I won't hang around long enough to find out. So I am hoping that there are others as interested in early ball play as I have been, as David Block has been, as George Thompson has been, and Thompson's discovery of the game between the gymnastics and the Sons of Diagoras in 1805, possibly a Columbia College reference, is highly stimulating. I think there's a lot to be done.
Peter Morris says, excellent, John. This way to the egress, as P.T. Barnum said, and thanks for continuing to lead that procession.
Well, Peter, who is a great pioneer and one of our most splendid writers on the subject. If there's anything I don't know, I feel certain Peter does.
From Dixie, who you know till ago, her usual, perfect and excellent. Thanks for your time today. Just I'm trying to keep up here. They're coming in like a shower here.
Well, it's, I just see a note coming across from Sam, and he indicates that he has noticed some first-time attendees. Well, welcome to all of you. And, we have referred to ourselves as a merry band of researchers, and we are indeed friendly. We are cordial. You should feel that you have joined a group in which everyone is linked and no one is distant. So we are all reachable by email. We're all on Twitter or Facebook and soon enough Instagram. And we are interested in sharing not only our knowledge, but sharing our ignorance and sharing our fun.
Well, what I'll do, John, at that with those words, I'll let this pass on. But I would like for you, if you're able to, you may want to preserve some of these comments, and when you later on when you click your chat button, then could read them at your leisure. I want to thank you again for all you have done for this committee from its founding in 1982. I didn't want to make it too old. So all the way to its current situation and our current status.
I see someone has just asked, is there any change that I hate in the game? And no, I think change is good. And a bit of disruption is good to keep us on our toes. And even what seems to be an excrescence, the man on second base, the phantom runner in extra innings, I understand the reason for it. And it's because we have 13-man pitching staffs and starters don't go more than 4 innings as a rule. So we can't burn out pitching staffs and have cannon fodder coming up from Class A to start games at the major league level. This is, in fact, what we had in the 19th century, where you had people being pulled out of the stands to play in a game. Clarence Dow, a Boston sports writer in 1884, was called out of the stands to play center field for the Boston Unions. I think he had 2 hits and 3 at-bats. The more the baseball is compelled to change and compelled to recognize certain inadequacies in the way the game is played, the more valuable, I think, is an understanding of the earliest professional leagues.
What I found very interesting, not knowing what you were, of course, going to actually write and say here today, but when I saw the announcement from the MLB and the Hall of Fame and from SABR about the inclusion of the Negro Leagues, 1920, 1948, being their stats coming in with and being listed with Major League stats, I thought that was the first thing that came to my mind was the UA. The Union Association of 1884, and of course the NA, 1871, 1875. So I was so happy to hear, or so enthusiastic to hear that you have those same sentiments, and I think that's truly correct. You know, if you look at the resolutes of Elizabeth, New Jersey, and,
yes,
whatever
1873, right. And the Brooklyn Atlantics with a record of 2-42, which spiders can't even envy.
Well, I'll leave this chat for you to read, John, because it'll help you. You'll want to preserve it. All right, thank you so much, and we're going to thanks again, John, for everything. And we're going to go to our break here. We have a substantial break. All the way until 1:40. So if you would like, as